Hello, and welcome to Naut For Thought, a podcast focused for psychonauts and the like. Honestly, I'm probably going to cover a lot. Anything really related to drugs, altered state of consciousness, alcohol, anything of that nature, I suppose. So, yeah. Should be pretty fun. I'm gonna just try and focus mostly on things related to psychonaut topics. That's gonna be the main forward pushing idea of this podcast. So yeah, right now I got a beer in my hand, bowl sitting in front of me is some pot. If you're a stoner, got some time to drink, pull it out and listen to me talk about random shit. Obviously I don't want this to just be a totally one-sided thing. I was mentioning this to my sister, and she was saying that if it's just you talking, it's gonna seem pretty self-centered, I guess, and she's not wrong. But that's not really what I'm going for. I'm not going for something that's meant for me to just be like giving my opinions out there all the time, like some political podcast where it's just constantly views being thrown around all over the place. I'm not trying to have something like that. So, yeah. So I'm gonna take a little drink here. I'm drinking Keystone Light, honestly, just because it's cheap, and I can buy like 30 of them for like $20. So, yeah. So I'm sorry if I'm a little quiet and awkward. This is different for me, and I'm in an apartment complex where I'm sure my neighbors can hear me, I think. Not that I really care, but it is something to think about, I guess. So, yeah, first topic of today, I think we're going to talk about just psychedelics and drugs as a whole. That's kind of what I'm going for mostly on this podcast. I think everybody has a lot of stories of specifically psychedelics. I myself could talk about acid alone for fucking hell a long time. So, at least for this first one, I was thinking I would just kind of cover everything as a whole and kind of talk about myself and introduce this podcast. So, yeah, let's get into it. Let's get into a topic. So, we'll start with weed. When I first started smoking, I started smoking when I was 15, so about 6 years ago. I'm gonna actually take a hit real quick. Give me a second. Alright. So yeah, I was 15 when I first started smoking, and I was in love with it right away. And drugs in general had kind of always fascinated me, but I was really scared about them. I had a sense of curiosity, but I hadn't really gotten into it yet. I was very into sports. I loved baseball. Even now, I'm still very into watching them. I wish I was still playing, but yeah, that's obviously not happening. So, yeah, I didn't really want to ruin baseball. I didn't want to ruin my mind, and thinking back, I was probably in the right thinking that way, but at the same time, I've definitely learned a lot and experienced a lot in 5-6 years of doing drugs. Not to say that drugs are needed at all. Anyways, at first I was thinking I would just talk about marijuana this whole podcast, but you know what, that's boring. So let's switch it up. Let's talk about the newest drug I've been getting into. Alright, some motherfucking DMT, which I'm guessing most psychonauts have experienced. Like, I almost feel like this is totally opinionated, obviously, and I don't think this is true at all, but it's almost like DMT is like a rite of passage to even consider yourself somewhat of a psychonaut, because I wouldn't call myself a psychonaut. I feel like a psychonaut is way more into doing psychedelics on a very grand scale, like almost making it a part of their life. And not psychedelics, I guess I shouldn't say that, but just altered state of consciousness. It's almost like a part of them, and that's what psychonauts are into. So yeah, and obviously a huge part of that is drugs. Drugs, obviously, psychedelics help to expand on that. God fucking damn, I can hear the stupid mic doing that feedback crap. It's a $10 mic, so I wasn't expecting anything that great, but the fact that it keeps doing that is so annoying, because if it didn't do that, it would be a pretty damn perfect mic. Anyways, yeah, so DMT, man, that's been an interesting drug, and I've barely even really gotten into it, so I'd be fascinated to hear other people's 2 cents on the subject, because it's a really fascinating drug. Every psychedelic is just so incredibly fast, man. Like, talking about acid, okay? I know I said I was going to talk about DMT. Maybe I'll just talk about psychedelics for this podcast. It is Naut For Thought. Yeah, so acid was actually the first psychedelic I did. And it was pretty crazy, man. I feel like every time I do acid, it's similar but so much different every time, and that's kind of the case with all psychedelics, I guess. They all have such different effects at different times, But yeah, like, even same with shrooms, man. Shrooms have been a lot of fun lately. I've been very, very into shrooms. I recently grew a batch of shrooms. It was called Purple Mystic, and that was some good stuff. I don't think I've ever had such potent mushrooms. I've had some strong doses. I've eaten, I think the highest I ate was 5 grams. I haven't eaten that much in a while, but taking 2.5 of that Purple Mystic was like taking more than 5 grams. Actually, I think I did a couple times. So DMT, though, that's something that I just very recently tried about 3 weeks ago, and it's an incredible drug. It's obviously nothing to be taken lightly, but my first night was pretty crazy. So, like I said, I've done quite a bit of mushrooms and acid in the past. So I was experienced in a way with psychedelics. I kind of knew what I was getting myself into, but at the same time, I had never smoked a psychedelic. I had smoked anything other than cigarettes and weed. So smoking that was just a lot to wrap my head around, I guess. I don't know, I like to overthink shit, and thinking about my drug experience, I've never smoked really anything that hardcore, so yeah, it's an intense drug, it's intense in every sense of the word. It's the way it looks, the way you do it, how it feels, the effect you have. It's not a drug to be taken lightly, that's for sure. But at the same time, oh my god, it's incredible. Like I said, that first night was pretty crazy. I experienced probably the most intense trips on DMT that first night compared to any other time that I've smoked. And like I said, I haven't smoked that much, but I've smoked enough to where I know that first night so far has been the most intense. I haven't had a breakthrough, I guess I should say that. It's tough, man. It's tough. So yeah, I didn't consider the harshness of it. I had heard Terrence McKenna talk about how intense smoking DMT can be. I mean, he compared it to smoking, like, what was it? I can't remember what he compared it to, but it's pretty crazy, man. It immediately coats every fucking cell in your mouth with this weird sour taste. I don't even know how to explain it, man. It's so bizarre. And the taste itself is almost like burning rubber, mothballs. I can't think of any other ways it's been described, but in my personal experience, that's pretty accurate. And it has a distinctly strange smell too, and it smells exactly like it tastes. So if you ever get the chance to smell DMT, you'll know what you're in for, taste-wise. Yeah, so on top of that, it burns the shit out of your lungs. And the main thing that I noticed with it is that if you're smoking weed, because you can do it in a couple of different ways, right? You know, you can do it in the oil burner, the old meth baby way. Or if that intimidates you like it did me for a little bit, then you can do it the sandwich way. And you just put a little weed in the bowl, sprinkle DMT into it, put weed on the top. But that has so many problems, man. My first night, I went through so much DMT because I was smoking it through weed, you know, and I was just going through it like fucking crazy. I went through so much that first night. I mean, I had some pretty fun moments, but I didn't have a breakthrough, and I wasted a ton. I know I did. So I would recommend doing it in the oil burner way. But anyways, back to that first night. So I'm doing it in the the sandwich method, and it's so fucking harsh on your lungs, dude. You're taking a hit of weed and you're taking a hit of DMT at the same time. I mean, I thought I had some strong lungs, but no. I've taken fat dabs. I'm pretty sure I've taken a half-gram dab. I don't think I've taken a full gram. Yeah, I would have remembered that. But I mean, I've taken some burning hot, huge dabs. So my lungs are very experienced to smoking pretty harsh drugs, I guess. You know, I've smoked cigarettes. I vape a lot. I don't anymore, actually, which I might talk a little bit on the podcast one day, but yeah. So you gotta set it up right. So I set it up on my bed at first, and it was pretty chill, you know. I didn't mind that, except, you know, when I'm on my bed, I'm laying up against a wall, and it can get a little uncomfortable. Not to mention, when you're actually smoking, right? So, God, I just keep bouncing all over the fucking place with this. I have no structure. Some people are really good with their structure, and maybe in the future I'll try and really order it in a better way to where I follow through with a certain path of this is what it should do. But today I kind of just wanted to talk, man. You know, I've had a rough week, and I had a good time with my family this weekend. Nobody wants to hear this. Anyways, give me a second. I'm gonna take a drink. So yeah, more on how it feels when you're taking it. Not even necessarily like the experience of the drug, but just, you know, the effects that it has on your body immediately, if that makes sense. I don't know. Anyways, so for one, it makes you fucking hot as shit. It just immediately skyrockets your body temperature. It's insane. I mean, I've had some pretty sweaty experiences on the first couple of hits of DMT, or at least I feel like I'm just pouring buckets of sweat. Yeah, so then my stomach will like fucking turn in on itself, man. It'll do the craziest shit. It's so uncomfortable, and it's not pleasant at all. And then I feel like my eyes are like trying to shoot out of my head and shit, and it's not necessarily a fun experience right away, especially on fairly low amounts. Like, it's like almost the lower dosage, the more you feel body-wise, and that's not really a good thing. So yeah, that first night, I'm going hard on hits out of the sandwich bowls in my bong, and I was watching a video of this guy smoking DMT on YouTube. You can find it by just looking up DMT smoking live, I think. I'm sure that'll pull it up. And his name is Icarus480. Shout out to that guy. He's fucking awesome. I probably have a bit of inspiration for this because of his channel. And honestly, if I could ever have him on here, that would be so fucking cool. Anyways. So, yeah. I'm watching this video of him smoking as I'm smoking just to like give myself inspiration. Because if you can't tell, I don't really have any friends. I mean, I do have friends, but nobody that would do that with me. Yeah. Even I was pretty scared of it for a while. But anyways, so I'm watching him smoke and I'm like trying to take hits with him, and I take my first few hits, so keep in mind I'm completely confused on what I'm doing, like I'm putting in the tiniest little bit of DMT into the bowl, and just like barely, like I sprinkled a layer, Jesus. I sprinkled a layer onto quite a bit of weed and then stuffed a shit ton of weed on top of that. So I'm smoking mostly weed. But I got a little bit of the DMT. Those first hits, I remember I was like looking at this video right in his hand. The whole video just looked like an acid trip out of nowhere, but it was pretty underwhelming. And like I said, it kind of just felt like my eyes were trying to like shoot out of my head. It was pretty uncomfortable feeling and really lame. Like even while I was doing it, I have lots of moments like that where I'll take a hit of DMT or I'll take a couple hits of DMT and it's just not enough, and it immediately like kind of puts me into a shit mood, which I need to work around. But yeah, so that's kind of how I felt at first. I took a hit, it was intense, but it just felt like acid, and that's not what I was going for, obviously. So I was pretty disappointed. I tried a little bit more, and I actually think that was the second time that I tried. Because the first time, the one that I was describing where I just sprinkled a tiny little layer, I mean, I barely put anything into that bowl, and mostly weed. I think that was the first time, and I straight up don't think I felt anything. I think I tasted it and didn't feel anything. And then I think the second time I loaded a little bit more DMT, and that's when I felt like I was on acid, So, yeah, and then I can't really remember where it went from there, because, I was going pretty hard on it. I wasn't necessarily trying to just, like, go crazy and smoke a shit ton of DMT, bro. But it was more of, I was trying to get as much as I could out of it, I guess. And I could just tell that what I was experiencing with, like, the acid similarities, I could tell that that's not what I was going for. So that's why I kept smoking more, if that kind of makes sense, Yeah, so at one point, I load up quite a bit. I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I don't want to waste a shit ton, but at the same time, I want to have an experience, man. So I pack in quite a bit into a sandwich bowl and a bong. And I remember I'm on my bed looking at like a wall that had some frames with posters. And oh man, I wish I could just put up a picture of this, but it's a podcast, obviously. Yeah. So anyways, just imagine a wall that's pretty skinny and think of two pretty big posters up towards the top, and then under that you got a layer of fairly small posters, and then under that you have like one tiny one in the middle. Oh man, that's probably the worst explanation. Anyways, you got a bunch of frames and some posters on the wall, organized in like a pretty nice way. Anyways, it's not just like randomly scattered. So I take a hit, and it's pretty intense, nothing too crazy. And then I take another hit, and it is fucking intense. All of a sudden, I just see this pattern on my walls, on my ceiling, on my tapestries, on literally everything. And the texture, it was crazy. I can't really describe the pattern it was almost like I feel like I was almost looking at the tree of life, but if you saw like only a section of it, oh, see, that doesn't make any sense because the tree of life is just one thing that's repeated a bunch. I don't know. I just saw this pattern that it wasn't the tree of life, but it was something weird scattered all over everything in a very uniform pattern, like it was very symmetrical. Yeah, it was fucking crazy. And then it started to move and shit, and then it kind of went away. I wish I would have been able to take another hit, but I think even if I had, I don't think I would have broken through, because I think it would have been like maybe one more hit after that, and I probably would have broken through. Excuse me. But anyways, as I'm starting to come down, like, I can tell that my vision, obviously I'm hallucinating on DMT, but like the posters are slowly fading back into what they actually are. But it was so bizarre. So it was almost like they looked like camouflage, even though they're like, I have anime posters. They're all anime shit. Yeah, I feel like I probably shouldn't have said that. But yeah, it was like all of a sudden all the colors like blended and melted together, and then all of a sudden I start to see this uniform pattern in everything. It was fucking crazy, intense, and so cool. And I remember when I came out of it, like out of just being in this trance almost, just like freaking out. I was excited, obviously, because it was crazy. It was so intense and a lot of fun. It was so cool, and I like looked over at my cat and just was like, oh dude, oh my god, it was so much fun. That was crazy. I wish you could smoke some too, bro. yeah So it was a lot of fun that first night, but I was completely changed on my view, like when it comes to spirituality and religion. With acid and shrooms, I had already had a very different view than most people. I feel like when it comes to religion, I have a much more spiritual targeted sense, but even that, I'm not really into tarot cards and things like that. Teach their own. I had a friend that was really into it. My mother is into it, so yeah, I'm not against that, but that's not really my thing. So anyways, with DMT though, with that pattern that I was seeing that I couldn't really make out, but I could at the same time. I don't know how to explain it. I felt like it was something trying to talk to me, and I felt like if I would have smoked more, I would have at least had that connection more, but it felt like not necessarily like something was talking to me, or like I was having some connection with a DMT entity or anything like that. Well, maybe something like that, but I wasn't like straight up having a conversation with a DMT entity like you would if you maybe broke through. But I could tell that it was something out there trying to communicate with me in a strange way that I couldn't quite make out because I wasn't on enough. Yeah. So that was the first night. I kind of called it good after that. I think I ate some food and I went back to it, and it was, oh yeah, I ate some food, and oh my god, that's probably a horrible idea to eat fucking tacos before smoking DMT, because like I said, when you smoke it, it does some pretty unpleasant things to your body, and one of them is fucking up your stomach. And after eating some real spicy tacos, it did exactly that. It was unpleasant. Smoking DMT after eating tacos. So I would recommend eating very light, or at least just something healthy, maybe, something that's not gonna churn your stomach in on itself. But before I felt like I was dying out of my stomach, I had a pretty intense moment. It was kind of hard to explain, I guess, but I'm laying down more on my bed than sitting upright, and I'm looking upward at my posters. And instead of having like things change on the textures of everything, all of a sudden I saw these like little colors kind of form in midair across my vision in like a very grid-like form, if that makes sense. And I'm listening to fucking intense music. I guess I should have mentioned that. This whole night I'm listening to 1200 micrograms. Highly, highly recommend at least just listening to them if you do psychedelics, or if you're a psychonaut in any sort of the sense, I would recommend at least checking them out. They're not necessarily something you would listen to like driving to work, but they're fucking so good at what they do when it comes to psychedelics, music for psychedelics. So I'm listening to that, and it's intense music, right? And I'm just seeing this like grid, just like I don't even know how to explain it. It was like moving with the music, but it was like the grid just started crossing through itself. All these tiny little orbs of color just started shifting in this like very jaggedy way. Oh god, that probably doesn't make much sense, but it was fucking intense, to say the least. After that, I kind of called it quits for the night, but yeah, it was crazy. It was a lot of fun. So, the second day, you know, my spirituality is kind of changed, because like I said, with acid and shrooms, I knew that there was other things out there, or at least that's how I felt, because I know everybody has their own opinions on this kind of crap, but I felt that there was something more out there, not necessarily like a Christian God or anything like that. I don't know. I just knew that there was something more than humans, if that makes sense. Something greater that we can't really wrap our heads around. And with DMT, I felt like it was almost proven, in a sense, in my eyes, you know, and I just felt like I dove way more into those ideas more after that first night. So that second day, I go to a head shop, and I decide that I'm gonna get an oil burner. So I guess it didn't take that long to change my opinion on the subject of going from smoking out of a bowl to smoking out of an oil burner. But it is a big change, you know, it's intimidating. But I felt like it was a better way to go, and I would honestly recommend doing that. Maybe not your first time, I don't know. I feel like I'm not experienced on the topic yet, but yeah, it's just dependent on the person, I suppose. You know, if you already have access to weed and a bong, it might just make it easier for you on that first night. And yeah, but I don't know, if you're somebody like me that's not got a whole lot of people to do this kind of thing with, and you're definitely doing it by yourself, I would just be careful. Be very, very careful. I would recommend just trying to get somebody to at least watch over you, because, you know, if you are doing it through an oil burner, there's a chance that you could just, like, drop the oil burner and break it or burn shit, because, you know, it's fucking how you're lighting the outside of it. So, yeah, just be careful for sure. And that was my concern, was that I didn't want to fuck up using an oil burner. I didn't really know what I was doing at the same time. But anyways, let's go into the second day. So, I'm at a smoke shop, and I decided to get some sage. I mean, I decided to, like, do all sorts of shit to try and get onto this spiritual plane, because it's called the spirit molecule, man, and it's called that for a reason. I've heard other people call it the God molecule. Holy shit. The God particle. The God particle. That shouldn't have been so hard to say. Jeez. So, yeah, it's definitely something to get onto a spiritual plane and expand on beliefs of religion or anything of that nature, I would guess. Yeah, I'm just changed, man. Not entirely, it's not like, I'm not like a completely different person or anything like that, but I mean, that second day I was just completely different on the vibe that I went about with smoking DMT. You know, I felt the need to smudge my apartment with sage and just make sure that the vibes were extremely positive and that there's no negativity, and that I was doing it in the right environment with my cat sitting next to me and in the most comfortable setting that I could. And a lot of those things are very important. You know, you do want to be as comfortable as possible, throw on some pajamas and make a nice little chair on your bed. Just be ready to fall back and just kind of relax. So, yeah, I come home and I put back on some 1200 micrograms. I think I put on... Fuck. Give me a sec. I put on the album Heroes of the Imagination. And I can't remember what song I had playing, but my favorite listening to them sober, and I guess on drugs as well. The Cosmologist is amazing. Language of the Future, Acid for Nothing. Those three are really, really good. Yeah, so I have some song playing from that. Actually, no, it wasn't that. It was definitely their album 1200 micrograms. 1200 micrograms album, 1200 micrograms. And I think I had either ayahuasca or DMT playing. I can't remember. Both those songs are pretty fucking trippy. And I'm facing this tapestry that I have of the god Shiva, I believe is how you pronounce it, the Hindu god. It's either Shiva. I'm probably butchering the hell out of that, and I apologize. But it's a really cool tapestry, and I find Hinduism to be extremely fascinating. I've spent a lot of time learning about it. Apparently not learning how to pronounce the names, but yeah, so I'm facing this tapestry, and I take a fat hit of DMT out of a bowl that I had the night before. I had a hit left over that I didn't finish. So I just decided, you know what, it's probably not going to be much. I'm going to just rip this shit instead of wasting it. And oh my god, it was pretty crazy. So I slowly lay back into my bed as I'm just dead-eyeing at the Shiva tapestry, just looking straight into his eyes, which is kind of crazy because I found out not too long ago that I don't know how entirely true this is, but apparently Shiva's third eye in his forehead, when it opens up and a human looks at it, apparently your face just fucking melts off. Obviously that's something that I think I heard in a YouTube video. A documentary, I should say, but it was on YouTube, so it could have been easily false. Anyways, it was just kind of crazy that I was staring straight into his eyes, man. But anyways, it starts moving in this fucking circular pattern, just binding with the music, man. Just so amazing, and I'm just lost in this trance of this Shiva dance. And what's even crazier is that Shiva is known for his dance at the end of the universe. His dance is what starts the end of the universe. Am I right on that? Man, I should really have somebody with actual knowledge. I could be totally butchering that too, but I know that Shiva is known for some sort of dancing aspect, so that was pretty crazy. Yeah, that was the second day there. I smoked more, but it was very underwhelming because I was using a fucking oil burner and I hadn't done that before. Never. Swear, bro, I swear. It seriously was very different for me. It took some getting used to with, putting the lighter at a certain distance from the burner, and I don't know. Anyways, I still don't really know what I'm doing because I haven't really smoked that much since the weekend after that. Yeah, but to be honest, it was pretty uneventful. Although I'm thinking about maybe smoking some DMT tonight. We'll see. I do have work at 4 tomorrow. It's straight up 5 right now. I have 23 hours. I got some time, so we'll see. Yeah, I'm thinking about maybe wrapping it up here. I went a little overtime. I don't know what I'm gonna post this on to, man.
This is so cool, though. I love this. I don't even really care if I get a following. It would be awesome if I did, mainly because I would want people to conversate with. You know, it feels a little weird just sitting here talking by myself. I want that to be part of this podcast. I want the ability to just, oh, I come home from work, it's time to talk on the podcast. You know? Nothing too serious. This is a podcast literally designed for psychonauts. And so obviously I want to talk to people. And I have some people that I think I'll bring on here and there. But I myself, I think, will be doing most of this podcast by myself. Because these are pretty touchy subjects, you know. I don't think a whole lot of people would be willing to even talk about psychedelics outside of crime and shit. I guess maybe my view is a little. Yeah, so this is Not For Thought. Thank you for listening.